Yeah, and we'll go deep into it. But yeah, 80-20 principle, Pareto principle, very famous business idea that, and I use this idea loosely, but just that 80% or more of your success or your results is going to come from like very few of things of what you do. They call it the essential few, which is what we'll call the 20%. You can think about this in terms of people, like 20% of your 20% of the people in your life are creating 80% of your success, right? Or 80% of your happiness, and so it's finding and filtering for those few things that have the highest leverage and impact, and honestly, stripping out everything else.
How does one find that?
By having an impossible goal. Genuinely. You want a goal that's so high that because it's so high, almost everything you're doing right now won't work. So if and I love this because it gives a little more context, and then I'll kind of share how we used these ideas to help them properly frame their Q1, because they organized it in such a way that it was going to lead Q2 and the rest of the year for disaster. But the main idea here is that if you're going for a small goal, even a 2x goal, because the present and the future look so similar, honestly, 2x may feel big, but it's not that distinct. Right. It's not that different from who I am now. And honestly, it's taking the present and just creating more of it, just a little bit bigger. And so one of the core framework of 10x is easier than 2x is that if you go for 2x, you can keep 80% of what you're now doing.
Yes.
If you think about growing this podcast by 2x, or if I think about doubling my book sales or doubling revenue, I don't have to change that much. I do have to figure out a new 20%. That's just an analogy, but I have to figure out a few new things, but honestly,
it's a lot of what's already working.
Yeah, it's like, it's just maybe double down on what's already working, And so you really don't have to change that much to go 2x. It's not very creative. It's certainly not disruptive, to your point. And so it's very much a linear approach. Take the past, present, and use that to create a very similar future, maybe just a little bit bigger of a future. And so when you really think about a 2x goal, a big problem with that is that it's not distinct enough to actually help you parse the 20 from the 80. And so you can't fully know what are the best things because it's just not a good enough filter. And so making the goal so big that you honestly don't fully know how to do it, and then asking really hard questions from that future, like what would have to be true to begin pursuing this impossible goal. There's actually, interestingly, a lot of research on impossible goals. And I'm going to actually this is where I think I should just share the analogy of my son, Caleb. Because I think this is the easiest way to do it. So I love the quote. It's from Anais Nin. She says, "We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are." Right? Have you heard that? We don't see the world as it is. One of my psychology professors said, if a man says a woman is beautiful, he's actually describing himself. Does that make sense? Because he's describing his perspective, right?
Yeah.
He's describing his preference, right? If I say that car is amazing, am I describing the car? I'm mostly describing my perspective. And so we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And they call that a frame, or a mental model. We see the world through a perspective, a frame. And so one way of really looking at this is, my son Caleb is a high school tennis player. We live in Orlando, mecca of tennis, tons of tennis. He loves tennis. He wants to play college tennis. And this is kind of one of the first stories I told to explain impossible goals in 10x is easier than 2x, but his coach really challenged Caleb. His coach said, "Caleb, what is your goal?" And Caleb said, "My goal is to play college." And his coach pushed back and said, "Why isn't your goal to go pro?" And from my view, the pro goal absolutely is an impossible goal. And impossible goals are, like, the definition of it. They actually, in psychology, they use the word stretch goal.
Yes.
But stretch goal is a pretty weak term. And the actual definition is a goal that is unattainable with your current perspectives, capabilities, resources. Like, you don't know how to do it, and it actually is an unattainable goal. And so that's how I would view Caleb going for pro. It seems like an impossible goal.